Good morning. I'm in Pittsburgh at this year's Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly, but thanks to the modern magic of technology, I can be with you here in the sanctuary and on Zoom. Whether you live right around the corner and can get around without difficulty, or whether it's more of a challenge for whatever reason, you are most welcome to our sacred time together, to this sacred place where we invite one another to bring the wholeness of our being. Last December, by unanimous vote at a special membership meeting, the UUFP adopted a congregational covenant, a list of intentions describing who we aspire to be as a faith community. Of course, for intentions to have any meaning and for aspirations to come to life, they need to be kept in the forefront of our minds. For this morning's invocation, then, we'll read our congregational covenant together. The words are on the screen. Together, united by love and embodying gentleness, we, the members of the UUFP, covenant to welcome everyone of goodwill, listen and attend with compassion, interact with kindness, communicate with courage, use our gifts to enrich our mission, protect our earth, build racial, social, and environmental justice in the beloved community, model our UU values in the world, and embrace transformation within ourselves and others. The words of our chalice lighting come from the letter of James in the Christian Testament. James is often thought to have been James the Just, the brother of Jesus, and he was likely writing to other Jewish followers of Jesus. He uses the word works to mean good deeds and other value-based actions, as opposed to purely internal beliefs and thoughts. Pam, please light our chalice for us. What good is it, my siblings, if you say you have faith but do not have works? Can faith alone save you? If someone is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill," and yet you do nothing to supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? Faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. So show me your faith apart from your works, and I by my works will show you my faith. The Christian Testament's letter of James has long been controversial. James is the most Jewish of the Christian scriptures, and it emphasizes charity, hospitality, and other good works born of faith, rather than a holy interior faith that is unrelated to our worldly lives. This puts James in stark contrast to Paul's letters and their emphasis on faith as most important, even going so far as to warn against works as a temptation that could lead true believers astray. The reformer Martin Luther relied heavily on Paul when he argued that the Catholic Church was all too focused on sacraments and other works. And so he developed his Protestant theology of salvation by faith alone, by grace alone. And when Luther was working on his own translation of the Bible, he famously didn't want to include James at all, dismissing it as a gospel of straw and relegating it to an appendix. I don't remember reading the letter of James in school when I was growing up, in contrast to major chunks of the Hebrew Bible, the Christian Gospels, and selections from Paul's letters. But that's perhaps not surprising, given that there's no separation of church and state in England, and all schools are officially Anglican. So when I became a Unitarian Universalist and discovered in our hymn book that section from James I read as our chalice lighting, well, it was a delightful surprise, and I embraced it as part of my theology. Faith without works is dead. It's in acting on our values to make the world a better place that our faith comes alive. For me, the takeaway message from James is that faith should be neither quietly hidden nor ostentatiously displayed. that salvation isn't something that happens privately, individual by individual, and that working together for the greater community is an inevitable expression of the only faith worth having. Unitarian Universalism certainly emphasizes works rather than faith alone. We say deeds, not creeds, because what's important is how we treat one another and the world around us, not just what each of us thinks inside our own heads. After all, we know that everyone believes something different, and yet we also know that what really matters is how we relate to one another, the promises we make to each other, the commitments we share to shelter the unhoused and feed the hungry, and then to change our society so that nobody is unhoused or hungry in the first place. Moreover, if we are able to see past the specifics of individual creeds and participate in good deeds together, we find that Unitarian Universalism doesn't really distinguish between faith and works. And it goes deeper than the truth that ethical action must be based on faith for it to be effective. So we speak of the hyphenated faith in action instead. This is neither faith as a list of prescribed beliefs, nor works as a set of empty observances, but faith in action that calls us all into salvation in this life, bringing the kingdom of heaven into being here on earth. That's what we're talking about this morning, but for now, let's sing. A little over 6 months ago, by unanimous vote at a special membership meeting, we adopted a congregational covenant, a list of intentions describing who we aspire to be as a faith community. The 8th point of our covenant reflects our commitment to live our faith in public, not merely in words, but in our actions. We covenant to model our UU values in the world. Unitarian Universalism does not ask people to agree to someone else's statements about who we are and why we're here and what happens next, with all that affirmation being all that matters. Rather, Unitarian Universalism asks us to answer these questions for ourselves and then act upon our answers. After all, what's the point of saying we value, say, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, or the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, but then doing nothing to make them real? Don't get me wrong, those are definitely good things to believe in, but if they only exist as intellectual propositions, then we might as well not believe in them at all. As the great UU theologian James Luther Adams said, a purely spiritual religion is a purely spurious religion. If the only place our faith exists is inside us, not beyond us, not even between us, then it doesn't actually matter whether our faith exists or not. So what does it mean to model our UU values in the world? Well, first off, there are lots of values to choose from. In the 7 principles that have been in our UUA covenant for almost 40 years, I count 23 values. And as I've said before, justice is the only such value to be mentioned twice in the 7 principles. Or there are the 7 major values named in the proposed new UUA covenant that we've been debating at General Assembly this week. Love, interdependence, transformation, justice, pluralism, equity, and generosity. Or there are the 4 values that we identified at the heart of who we are as the UUFP: wonder, love, service, and generosity. Now, modeling 23 values all at once is probably too much to ask of any of us. Maybe 7 is too many, maybe even 4. So it's okay for you to pick one or maybe two values and say to yourself, this is what I'm going to focus on right now. If we all do that, different people will pick different values anyway, and that's great. All of the values connect to one another too. So between us, we can model a lot of different ways of being you in the world, and that's a good thing. So then how do you act upon whatever manageable set of you values you have chosen? Well, there's no single answer to that question either. Let's suppose you pick wonder. You could practice mindfulness of the everyday miracles that surround us. You could join a group of people who want to learn from others' experiences and life issues. You could share something that you find wonderful, whether it's from poetry or music or art or science or history or language or religion. You could sing or write or paint or cook or create something yourself and let other people appreciate it too. However you choose to model wonder, I know for sure that our world would be greatly improved if more people approached life with appreciation, gratitude, delight, curiosity, and joy. Of course, as part of our covenant, modeling our UU values in the world isn't just something we've promised to do individually. We've promised to do it together. And as a congregation, we do that in many different ways too. We feed and shelter people at port 2 or 3 times each winter. We collect non-perishables and money for the food bank. And remember that what you contribute by the end of this month will not only be doubled by the trustees, but will be doubled again by a matching gift opportunity at the food bank. We take part in the Crop Hunger Walk this year on October 15th to support both the food bank and Thrive. We educate ourselves about what's going on in our world, both in terms of what's going wrong and what's going right, so that we can expand our own horizons and understand where we are needed to help and where we need to work on ourselves too. We demonstrate on our corner every Monday, either in the afternoon or in the morning, depending on the season, for Black Lives Matter and racial justice. We were very well represented at the Raw Tools event on overcoming gun violence, and we participated in a slew of Pride events this month. We show up for community vigils and witness events, many of us in our yellow Side with Love t-shirts. We work with the NAACP, the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, the Legislative Collaborative Table of Hampton Roads, and Virginia Interfaith Power and Light to advocate for certain legislative priorities. Many of us going to Richmond in January and February to meet with our legislators and tell them what matters to us. We help register voters. We write postcards and letters in support of voting rights, reproductive rights, civil rights, and we make our opinions on these issues heard. And we don't just do this work as one congregation. We partner with other UU and non-UU congregations. I've named many organizations with which we work on the basis of common values, and we recognize that we need help to do our own work ourselves, to be a welcoming congregation, to be a green sanctuary, to be an anti-racist community, to be accessible for people with a range of physical, cognitive, and financial abilities. Now, just as I don't expect you to model 23 UU values all at once, I don't expect you to be part of all of these efforts, or even more than a few of them at the same time. I don't think it would be wise even to try. It's why we have a Justice Committee as an umbrella for all of our efforts to show what love looks like when it speaks in public, And it's why we now have 5 justice teams, so that each team can focus on a particular area of justice work. Whatever it is we do, individually or together, it's modeling our UU values in the world. It's putting our faith into action. It's taking whatever spirit exists inside us and acting upon it, because that's when it actually comes alive. I'm going to ask you some wondering questions now, and I'll give you a little time after each to reflect. Each question will also be shown on the screen. I wonder how you live your own beliefs in practice. I wonder how you understand the UU saying, deeds, not creeds. I wonder which UUFP justice effort resonates with you. I wonder which UU value you would pick to focus on right now.
Hello from Pittsburgh. It's Saturday evening here at our UUA's General Assembly, just after a fabulous Ware lecture given by Dr. Imani Perry. She took us on a journey with our UU ancestors Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, talking in part about how they, and particularly Harper, sought to live their religious values in much the same way as we try to live ours today. General Assembly is, of course, one of the biggest, most obvious ways that UUs from all over the US, indeed from all over the world, strive to live our UU values. And that's particularly true this year, as we work on our UUA covenant to name what matters to us and how we promise to be in relationship with one another. I have this bookmark, for instance, that right at the top says, Unitarian Universalists act on our values. And then it says, love holds us together as we constantly align our actions and values. Then there's the UU clothing that a lot of us here this week are wearing. There are shirts with rainbow chalices and hearts on them. And there's a new shirt with the colourful Flower of Values design that I hope will be available soon. Many of us, of course, are wearing Side with Love shirts. I was wearing one yesterday outside the convention centre when someone who had just gone past a large group of people wearing Side with Love shirts stopped me to ask what the shirts mean. I explained in as brief an elevator speech as I could that we are Unitarian Universalists and this is our biggest social justice and advocacy campaign. They were happy to hear that and thanked me. And aware of some harmful misunderstandings that have happened at some prior General Assemblies, there's a real effort to make sure that we treat everyone with kindness and respect, particularly the UUA staff and volunteers and the Convention Centre staff who make General Assembly possible for us. We've been debating some weighty matters this week, and you can feel the passion that people have in these discussions, but we know that any disagreements are only about ideas, and we are still in covenanted community with one another. Here, we've been living our religious pluralism. On Friday evening, I attended the Shabbat service held by UUs for Jewish Awareness. There have also been services and gatherings held by the UU Christian Fellowship, the Covenant of UU Pagans and others, as well as caucus groups for youth and young adults and others sharing particular identities. And throughout the week, we've been learning from one another, sharing our inspiration, practicing the democratic process, opening ourselves to transformation as we inch toward faithfully becoming the religion that we know we can be, that the world needs us to be. Of course, General Assembly is an exceptional example of UU community. Most UUs never participate in it, unfortunately, though hopefully more than ever will as it becomes truly multi-platform. And next year's General Assembly is wholly online. But wherever we gather with other UUs, in worship, in classes, in small group programs, at marches and demonstrations, meeting up with a UU friend for coffee, even by ourselves, knowing that we are accompanied by a cloud of witnesses. Wherever we go, we know that all of our words and actions are a chance to model our UU values in the world. May we make the most of each such opportunity.
I invite you to imagine reaching out to one another, no matter how many yards or miles separate us physically, knowing that we are nonetheless connected to one another in spite of the distance. Pam, please extinguish the chalice. As we bring our sacred time together to a close, I bid you go forth with these words of Unitarian Universalist minister Robert Kaufman. We came together this morning to share our deepest concerns, speaking and singing words of inspiration and hope. Let us commit ourselves to do what we can to ease the burden of those who suffer, to stand for decency and compassion. Let us pledge to work for a more wholesome environment for us and for all the generations that will follow. But these are just words. The hymns we sing are just songs. All our reflections are just idle thoughts. When we convert them all into loving and responsible action throughout the week, then and only then will this morning become what we needed it to be, a time of worship. Please be seated for our postlude.